Welcome to Season 4 of You're Not Alone with Townsend. On this podcast, I'll be sitting down with guests from all over the world to discuss everything under the umbrella of mental health, diagnoses, sharing stories of resilience, medical advice, and even getting some tips and tricks from licensed counselors. The goal of this podcast is to teach us how to understand others, ourselves, and help spread love and light, one episode at a time. Please make sure to like and follow this podcast, and if you'd like to see the videos of these conversations, hop on over to my YouTube channel, TownsendTmusic YouTube, where you can find the podcast and my latest music. This podcast is run solely by supporters and listeners just like you. So if you'd like to help keep this podcast and project going, please consider hopping on patreon.com/TownsendTmusic to be part of the team. You'll also find extra content and questions with each and every guest. Let's hop in. What is up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of You're Not Alone with Townsend. It is such an honor. Season 4. I cannot believe we are here. It has been an amazing journey. I can't thank you listeners enough for sticking along with us and just always want to learn, always recommending new guests that we should have, following us on socials. Today, we're going to be chit-chatting about someone that I actually just recently met at a NAMI meeting, I guess you would call it. It's the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I'm super involved with them. His name is Travis. We're going to be chit-chatting about servicemen and women, you know, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, all of those things, people that have served, or we'll be talking about mental health, all of those things. So things that I'm incredibly passionate about and have so much respect for. So Travis, thank you so much for joining us. It's such an honor.
Yeah, thank you all for having us, first of all.
Oh, absolutely. I always like to have my guests kind of introduce themselves because I feel like you know yourself better than anyone here. So who is Travis? Your name, job, title, whatever you want to share with my listeners.
Yeah, so I'm Travis Browning. I'm first and foremost, I'm a United States Army veteran. So after the Army, I kind of was looking for something else to do. So I was a fireman starting out when I was a kid, 13 years old. I started as a volunteer fireman as a cadet, worked my way up. So then I was like, well, what else can I do? So I became a police officer back in 2009. So I'm a full-time sheriff's deputy in Central Arkansas as a K-9. And then if I didn't have enough on my plate, I decided, well, I might as well go to EMT school as well. So I do that, you know, kind of on the side. And then I was like, well, I just don't have enough things on my plate. So let me start some more stuff. So in, 2018, we started a nonprofit named Heroes Behind the Line. And that's kind of where we are today with that. So.
Man, oh man. Okay. You sound like someone I know named Townsend. Just add, we don't do that. Let's do that. It sounds like you do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'm the jack of many trades. I'm a master of zero, I think.
Master of boy, I feel
we'll get there
deep.
one day, yeah.
Feel that deep in my soul. I'll always try. I'm the master at none of these though.
Yeah, I'm the most okayest at all of them, so yeah.
I love that so much. I feel like that'd be a great podcast, like most okayest at this. I love that. So you were in the service. How many years did you serve? Did you have any deployments? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I joined the Army right out of high school. I'm from a small town, Sheridan, Arkansas, so there wasn't a whole lot to do. And, coming up from a lower income family that I was, I didn't have much options for college and things of that nature. So I had to figure something out. I knew that I kind of at an early age, I always wanted to be in the public service realm. My grandfather was a fireman. My dad was actually an EMT way back when like EMTs weren't even a thing. They were just called drivers, and they would just drive circles around the hospital because they got paid more to go to the morgue than they did to go to the hospital. So EMS hadn't really started back then. It wasn't like we know EMS today. So I was like, well, it sounds like a good time. So I joined the military. I was an infantry soldier, 11 Bravo. I spent about a year back here and then got deployed to Iraq in late 2007 or 2008. So I spent a year overseas and then came back. And unfortunately, I suffered an injury when I was overseas. And so spent some time going through that process in the VA, which is kind of a nightmare. And so, if you ever had to deal with it, it's just, there's a lot to it, a lot of moving parts. And if you don't know how to operate it, you're getting lost in the mix. And so that's where I think a lot of the issues with the VA system comes in with our veterans and dealing with mental health and stuff. It's just like, you get so tired of trying to get help and you can't get it and you don't know how to get it. And So, but luckily over the years, they've really up the help and the amount of resources that are available. It's gotten better. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But there's nothing perfect in this world. But it's slowly getting there. So, and I think that's kind of what led to the public service side of things that I wanted to help with and start doing. So,
yeah. So I guess it's been a couple of years ago now. We had he was in the Army, I believe was the branch that he was in, pretty high up, and was talking about coming back home and how hard that was, and how the VA, they do help a little bit, but they were lacking in some areas. And he was very complimentary of the VA and all that they offer, but just saying there's so much more that we can do. Not being in the service, it's hard to know, So
right.
people on the outside are like, well, we don't know what's lacking. We don't know how to help. So I love having you all on because as an outsider, we don't know. So speaking to the people like you all.
Now, a quick shout out to our sponsors.
If you're looking to buy or sell, I have the perfect realty company for you. Clark & Co. Realty is located in the Benton, Bryant, Arkansas area. And they understand that buying or selling a home is more than just a transaction. It's a life-changing experience. That's why their team of highly seasoned real estate professionals is dedicated to providing exceptional, personalized services for all their clients. They truly take great pride in the relationships they build, and they always work relentlessly on the client's behalf to help them achieve their perfect real estate goals. They always have the client in mind, and I can speak firsthand when I say how reliable, trustworthy, and quick they were. When I was looking to buy my first home, they were there with me every step of the way, answering every question I could think of. They showed me a great amount of knowledge and patience through the process. It's no wonder they've won so many awards for their outstanding services and their excellent relationships with clients. So if you're looking to buy or sell, there is no better option than Clark & Co. Realty.
So I got deployed to Iraq. It was kind of a whole interesting way of doing things. There had been some guys in the unit I was with that had been deployed previously. And I remember talking to some guys on the flight over, cause it's a heck of a flight. It's like you take off and then it's sunshine and then it gets dark and then you go to the sunshine again and it's dark. You're like flying through. It's weird. You know what I mean?
I don't. I can't say I've ever been there.
It's just such a long flight. It's like you're going through the sun coming up and down a couple of times. So that was kind of interesting. Of course, I was a little bit older than some of the other guys that were getting deployed. There were some newer guys that were like fresh, they've never left their home and they went to, boot camp and then they were getting deployed and it's, you hear all these stories and, the We Were Soldiers movie or, Band of Brothers or whatever. And you've got these super young guys and you don't really ever think about it until you're there and you're like, man, that kid is fresh out of high school, is barely big enough to carry a rifle, yet alone go overseas and try to fight for anything. And so, the plane ride over, we were talking to a guy and he said, man, when you get off the plane, he said, you're going to feel the jet engines, still going. And, then you're going to walk away and you're still going to feel like you're in the jet engines because the heat just never disappears. Right. And he was right about that. So there, it's not like a welcoming thing where you get off a flight here and there's a nice, Starbucks there in the airport. You're just getting off the plane, walking down some stairs, and you're in the middle of a war zone, essentially. Originally we flew into Kuwait, which, not saying Kuwait doesn't have issues. It's not nearly as, problematic as Iraq and Afghanistan are, but that was just where we had to go originally to kind of get started. Just a lot of it was acclimation to the heat since, if you can think of a day in Arkansas, it's like that, but worse. There's just not a lot of humidity. So it's a different heat. It's a dry heat, but it's still terrible. But we get done there in Kuwait, and then we spent a couple of weeks kind of training up to head over. And this was after spending months in Mississippi and Alabama and that terrible weather as well, trying to get prepared to go. And so once you actually make it to country, then we're spending time training and learning how everything works and who's who and where do we get food at and where do we, everything. It's like a whole little thing. Obviously, you can't have a fuel station in the middle of the war zone. So we would be transporting from like a quiet area up to to Baghdad, to Joint Base Balad, to, whatever. And this was for every armed forces, everybody's using this fuel. And so We spent a lot of time driving back and forth across empty deserts in the middle of the night. Getting hit by IEDs, getting hit by sniper fire from just the randomest things that you've seen in the world. But you would just be driving and randomly the road just disappeared. There was no road. It's like they built part of it and then they just stopped. And then a couple miles up, they started building again. And of course, everything's been blown up by, mortar fire or IEDs, and, Taliban had done this or that to it. And so we're constantly your heightened stress is there 24/7 because everything that we look at is a potential threat. Like, oh, that's just a piece of trash. No, that's an IED. Oh, that's just a car. No, it's the vehicle-borne IED, and they're coming to blow us up. Oh, that's a little small child. Well, he's got, bombs strapped to his chest to walk to us and ask for candy. And when he does, they pull the trigger. And so no matter where you were, it was just hypervigilance 24/7. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with coming home, because I know I did, because originally when I got over there as a young specialist, I was a gunner on 1151, which is a Humvee. And I got promoted because apparently I can drive it like I stole it. I don't know. I was just a really good driver. A truck commander really liked my skills. And so he's like, you're going to be my driver from here on out. And so, but coming home, knowing that, you had scouts that were out front of our convoys that were throwing what we call chem lights. They're like little fluorescent sticks. You break them. They made them for the Marines because Marines break everything. And so when you break it in half, it actually makes it work. And so that was a joke about the Marines, by the way.
I get it. I get it.
So my crayon friends out there.
Yeah, I think the Army guy was joking about the Navy last time he was here.
Yeah, you always joke about the branch that you're not in. It's just the way you have to. It's like in the rule book, I think, somewhere. But so, when you're driving, you're looking for these chem lights, that means there's a potential threat or, something to watch out. And it could be a pothole or it could be some trash or whatever. But then when you come back home, I remember leaving the base after being able to go home, and I'm looking for chem lights everywhere. Wow. The person driving, I'm yelling at them because, they got too close to the side of the road, because if you get too close to the side of the road in Iraq, you get blown up. And then, it was just everything. Like, no matter, every overpass we looked, I'm looking for snipers or people throwing grenades at us, because that's what we were used to. And so, like, how long is this going to last? That was the question I had. And that's a great question, because it could last forever for some. It could last a couple of weeks for others. And, as good as I do, our bodies are all different and we all handle things differently. But, I don't know. It was very interesting, to say the least, trying to come back home and just be normal again,
quote unquote normal.
Yeah. The whatever that means. Right.
Yeah. I've spoken actually since the one with the guy in the Army. I had a lot of people reach out, and that was something that was really common, was just getting used to daily things that people like myself, typical civilians, would have no idea. Like that, I would never know that people were out looking at pieces of trash. Like, that might be a bomb. That might be that. Be careful with kids walking up. We would never think about that, which is why I love interviewing people like yourself. But one of the ones was I had to learn how to drive a normal car and to not be suspicious about traffic. And so getting back into the car was incredibly triggering for him. Something that he ended up having to get therapy for, to get back into just a typical driving on the road in a car. And he talked about how still at night, there's a little bit of trouble there. But speaking of that, did you notice, like, being in the service and then coming back home, did you notice an incredible amount of servicemen or women struggling with mental health? I can't even wrap my head around that. It's like living in a video game for all that time and then being like, okay, it's over. Go home and be normal.
Yeah. Turn the switch off that doesn't exist. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think we all had problems coming back. I remember sitting, and I know this is crazy. We'd been out all night long on a mission. I was super tired. We'd been hit a couple of times, and, I'm like, man, I'm just super hungry. And so before I went to bed, I was like, I'm going to go over here to the chow hall, get a box to eat real quick. And I see this dog walking by. Now, dogs overseas are not like dogs here. They're all wild, vicious packs of dogs, and they're the craziest thing in the world. And as he walks by me, he wasn't bothering me, but he had a hand in his mouth, like a human hand. And I just remember him walking by and thinking, it's just Tuesday, like that was and I'm like, why is why am I thinking that this is a normal thing to see? Now, where the
Wow.
hand came from, there's no telling, but I just remember just sitting there eating my, mac and cheese or whatever it is I had, and just it didn't even faze me at that point. And so
Yeah.
I'd got to a point where I just started putting everything on that proverbial shelf, and
Yep.
just said, oh, well, we'll just keep going. But then what happens when that shelf gets too full, and falls down on us? And I think
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people had, is we all came back with different issues like that. And we just kept saying, we got to be strong. We got to keep doing what we're doing. We're still in the military. Some of us, whether they were guard or reserve or full-time or whatever, we've got stuff to go back and do. So let's just keep trying to push on. And so I think the problem is that some of them waited too long to get help, and that's where we get a lot of the service member suicide that we get. It used to be 22 a day. I think it's down a little bit now to 20, 21. But there's organizations out there that want to try to bring that number to zero. And as much as I would love to say that's amazing, it's just sometimes we have to look at, and I don't think we'll ever get to that point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I keep referring back to one of the episodes with the man that was in the Army. He was pretty highly ranked, and he discussed being in a situation where his best friend, someone he spent breakfast, lunch, dinner with, they were out on a mission, ended up, something went off, some kind of bomb, and he watched his best friend fly, but his legs go a different way.
Yep.
And then he had to stand there and just try to help him. And so he's talking about how in the moment, just like you said, you almost disassociate and you're like, okay, take care of this. Let's keep going. But then you come home and those thoughts just kind of stay on the shelf and kind of float around a little bit, which is wild. So I am a therapist with geriatrics or adult setting. And I had noticed that they don't talk about mental health. Not a thing, right? It's gotten better. But we would talk about the war and how they did things, and that was not a thing. They did not struggle, even though they would express like, I can't ever sleep, I get mad, blah, blah, blah. And when you bring it up, they might cry or something like that. But mental health was not, do not label that. We're getting better at saying, like when I speak with servicemen and women today, pretty much, I can't think of a single one. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Can't think of a single one that wouldn't say they didn't at least have something like PTSD, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Going back to kind of what I asked earlier, do you feel like a lot of the guys that you served with and came home with or have a community with, do you feel like pretty much everybody struggles with something or had to face something? Or
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that I can think of that didn't have something coming back.
Get out scot-free.
Yeah, I mean, nobody was, how many of us have been divorced, and lost jobs or had, marital children relationship issues, whatever. You talk about the old timers, and I spent a lot of time, with the vets and VFW and stuff like that. And we talk about it. And, if you even go back to say like the Civil War, they didn't call it PTSD, it was shell shock, or whatever, and so it was like they were having PTSD issues then. It's just nobody knew about what it was. So like, it's just because a bunch of, cannons were shot at him and, he's just not acting right.
Yeah.
But they all had problems. If you could honestly come to me and say you had zero issues, I would be very, very shocked.
Yeah.
And if we laid out the issues like this is what PTSD looks like. I can't see where anybody would say that they hadn't had some kind of issue. Now, like I said, did they all have issues? No, or not super crazy issues. I look at my issues and say, well, mine were, fairly moderate compared to some. I've never been suicidal or anything like that, but have I been angry before for no reason at all? Absolutely. If I wanted to put my hand through a wall for no reason, absolutely. I think we've all been there. But how do you fix it? And I think the VA has definitely stepped up, because Vietnam, if you go back to that, there was no band or parade or, welcome home. Thanks for doing what you did. That was a terrible war that nobody believed in apparently. And so when they got home, it was basically like, see you later. And that was the end of it. So whereas, when I came home, the VA was like, okay, we got to do something, not to mention the fact that, the C-130 that we flew out of, Kuwait in Iraq was getting shot at the entire time we're trying to take off. That was like a normal, it was like, we've been here this whole time.
Yeah.
And then here we are going to get taken down.
On my way home for Christmas.
On the way home. Yeah. On the way over there, we didn't care as much, but on the way home, we're like, you got to be kidding me. But so it was just that. And that was the things we were worried about. Like, it's not like, hey, what are we eating today? It's like, hey, are we going to get shot out of the sky today? So it was a very interesting time over there, but I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't change it for the world. I loved the time in the military. I loved being overseas with all the guys that I was there. There's not a bond any stronger than the ones that I had with those guys there. And so I'm forever grateful for those friendships and stuff that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I speak for everyone listening and watching this episode. Thank you so much for your service. And anyone listening that has served in any way, shape, or form. Like I said at the very beginning, I have so much respect for you guys, because I'm going to be honest, if the country depended on me, it'd be bad. I'm a real big chicken. I'm not going to do much of anything.
Yeah, there's always something for everybody to do. That's the thing about the military.
So you started this thing, and this is initially why I thought, Travis, I got to chat with this guy. You started this thing called Heroes Behind the Line. Kind of explain that to us, and what made you want to start that? I know that is incredibly vulnerable for you to be like, hey, yo, we struggled some.
Yeah. Well, so, after the military, like I said, I joined the service as a police officer and everything. And I've been doing it full time for 19 years now, I think. God, I'm getting old. But
no one has to know. No one has to know.
Right? Well, the gray hair on my beard tells otherwise. So going back to that, as a service member in the military, being deployed and stuff like that. And then I start coming to work for the sheriff's offices and things of that nature. I started seeing a lot of similar differences. The difference was that I spent my year in Iraq and I was done. But every day I have to wake up and keep seeing the things that we see as first responders every day. Mm-hmm. Our bodies are not made to deal with this trauma day in and day out. And I talk about this a lot. The average person deals with 3 to 4 traumas in a lifetime, whereas public service employees, they deal with 800 plus in their 20-year career. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, our bodies aren't meant to deal with that kind of stress. And so then what do? You start being mean to your wife or your spouse or whoever, your kids, or your job starts to slack, or it gets to be so unbearable that suicide's an option. And so, and then in the first responder world, especially amongst police officers, you're not allowed to talk about PTSD and suicide related issues, because then you got to worry about, well, not only am I already having 1,000 issues, well, now I'm going to lose my job and have a financial issue. And so it's best that we just keep hush about it. So I know years ago, before I started Heroes, I was seeing that I was having my own problems and needed some help. And so I reached out to the VA. Whether great or not, the VA was there and they said, here's what we have. This is the steps that we can take. This is what we can do. This is the stuff that we can do to help you. And so I took those steps, and it was great. And I just remember being sent to a outside source, because that was back, they had to outsource a lot of stuff because people weren't getting the help they needed. So that was one step the VA did make in the right direction, was they said, well, instead of taking 6 months to get you in a mental health professional here at the VA, we'll just send you to a guy down the street that's he's a doctor. He's got the same certification the guy at the VA's got. He just don't work at the VA. And so they sent me to an outside source. And I remember getting there and I looked around the walls of this dude's office and I didn't see anything about the military, like nothing. Like I seen his fancy degrees and he went to whatever medical school, and he likes to fish or something maybe, and then but nothing about the military. So my thought was, I'm going to shut down right here, because you don't understand what I'm about to talk to you about, because you were never in the military, you don't understand anything. And that was honestly the direction I kind of took with that. Now we talked for a little bit. It wasn't great, but that was the end of it. And they said, yep, you got some problems. You should probably get a check from the military, but that's about all I got. And I was like, wow, this is pretty useless. I think. Right. Not that it was his fault. It was kind of mine, because I just didn't want to talk to the guy, but so I remember that. And we had a police officer that went to the academy with us, and he had another police officer reached out and said, hey man, look, our buddy's having some issues. Basically long story short was he had went to a suicidal person's call. And when he got there, the guy had committed suicide and had passed away. And then unfortunately, it ended up being the officer's brother.
Oh,
and
gosh.
so not knowing that he's going to this call, there's times that we get an address and we're going, right. We don't always know. And maybe he didn't know he was there, or if it's a small town, it just, you got to go to the call,
sure.
And so, how do you deal with that? And so he struggled with it badly. And, he tried to go through, at the time, counseling wasn't really a thing for police officers. It's not on your, when you sign up to go work at the police department, you're going to get terrible insurance to begin with. And so mental health counseling wasn't part of that plan. And so what little bit of help that he did get just wasn't enough. And he ended up having to leave the job, dealt with it all the time, ended up having a medical issue. He died in the back of an ambulance with like a heart attack. They get him back, revive him. And it was so now it's like, now you've got the mental health side of, then the actual medical side. And so I'm like, dude, we got to do something. So I remember getting on my computer back then. This was before all the chat GPTs. And I was like, man, I can literally get on here and search for veteran suicide prevention stuff. And there's all these, there's so many things you could throw a box of chocolates at here. But there was nothing for the first responder world. And I said, man, something's got to change. So I kind of thought about that and was like, man, what can we do? And then unfortunately, a lieutenant at Jacksonville Police Department, Lieutenant Tilley, committed suicide in the parking lot of the police station. And there was a female named Brittany Wildhaber that worked for MIMS and Edtran that used to be out of Saline County. She had committed suicide in the fire department parking lot. And I was like, man, something like that. This is getting close to home. This isn't something you see on TV happening in California or what. It's happening here.
Right.
And so me and a buddy of mine said, hey, we got to do something. I don't know what, but we're going to do something. And so we decided right then and there to start Heroes. And so that's where Heroes started. There was some stuff like NAMI and things like that. NAMI wasn't necessarily first responder specific. And that's where we wanted to kind of be different, was because, you've got the suicide hotline, you've got NAMI, and you've got all these other great organizations, but none of them are suicide specific to first responders. And so that's why we said we want to be specific to first responders, because we're a whole other breed. And I don't want them to be like I was the day looking in that doctor's office saying, you don't understand anything I'm talking about. And so we got super lucky and met a lady that helped us out starting out. Her name was Susie Reynolds Reese, and she was a suicide prevention specialist down at CHI St. Vincent's in Hot Springs. And her father was a military member who had committed suicide as well. And so she understood the task. And she understood the lifestyle of where we were coming from dealing with first responders and stuff. And so we started building the name, and, we started out very rudimentary with just anything that we could. And now it's turned into where we provide 100% free mental health services to first responders. Right. We literally do this by donation only. We have coffee and shirts and freeze-dried candy that we sell, and all those donations that we get is what provides this. If I don't know how to explain it other than if it has anything to do with mental health and first responders, we're going to do it. We do the counseling. I have two counselors that I call on staff. Of course, we're a 100% volunteer ran organization. That was another big thing that I looked at when I first started this. Was there's some organization out there, and I don't want to name any names, the Wounded Warrior Project, but there's a lot of money that gets sent into these organizations. And if you look at what they're actually sending back to help, is a very small amount of that. And so that's my concern, is like, I'm not going to get paid to make these hundreds of thousands of dollars a year when I got a guy out there struggling, needing help.
Yeah.
So none of my staff, quote unquote, gets paid. We're all volunteers. So I've got two, licensed counselors on my staff, that deal with pretty much everything. Elisa is one of them. She's up in Northwest Arkansas. She was a police officer herself. And so that's kind of another thing that sets us apart, is it's not a random counselor that doesn't know about what you're dealing with. So Elisa was a police officer. Her husband's a police officer. Ariana, she's one here locally in Conway. And so her father was a retired, police officer out of Seattle. And her husband's a police officer. So she may not have been a police officer, but she's very police responder adjacent, is what she calls it.
Yeah.
And so, they really understand the struggles that we're dealing with. day in and day out. And of course, every other member of my team, they're either active police officers. I think everybody but one right now is an active police officer. One's a retired. But other than that, I mean, we had to build an organization with people that understand what the deal was.
I love that so much.
We got firemen on there. We've got, some EMS people. And so it's just, we work together to figure out what we can do. And that goes to not just the counseling side of things, but the what to do after a critical incident, right? So we do debriefs and things of that nature.
Wow.
We'll show up at your agency in the middle of the night to talk to guys. If you need peer support specialists, we're peer support specialists trained too. And so if we need to get a peer support specialist to you to handle the initial right now thing, we've got that. And then we can, all right, where are we at in this situation? So do we need just peer support, or do we need to go to the hospital, or do we need to go to, say Elisa, Ariana? And honestly, we don't care who you use. Like if you've got somebody that you can't afford to pay for, your insurance doesn't cover it, and you're like, man, I've heard they're a really good person. We don't care. Call us. We'll pay for them. We don't care who it is. It's not like you got to use only the people I use. I just have those two because they're two of the best. And you always want to surround yourself with the best for that situation. So
that is awesome.
Yeah. And so we do our best to make sure that, everybody's taken care of, whether it's a service member or any branch of the, first responder realm of things. So,
man. So does that include veterans?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
cool.
It absolutely includes veterans. Yeah. So it's both the first responder and veteran community. Okay. The great thing is we have so many resources with the VA and different veterans programs that we're lucky enough to, if they come to us as a veteran, there's a very good chance that I can get you in the system somewhere and get you a lot of help. That's actually, I don't want to say better than what I can do, but at the end of the day it is money. It's always money, and that's why we don't have as good as resources as we should when it comes to dealing with mental health, is because who's going to pay for it? But, if the VA is sitting over here with the program that's already going to be super beneficial to what you need, then, hey, we can get you into that. Let them pay for it because it's free to you as a service member. Yeah. Whereas, if I got to do the same thing elsewhere, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. So we don't want to be frugal with the money that we do get donated. So we don't want to just blow it. So if there's something that makes sense to do it this way, we're going to do it that way. So
I love that. Okay. Yeah. So how does that work? So let's say, I hear this podcast and I say, okay, I need that. Mm-hmm. How do people get a hold of you? How do they get to that point?
Social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. It's all Heroes Behind the Line. Super easy to find us. We have a website, www.heroesbehindtheline.org. You can go on there. There's a contact form you fill out, and that's whether you want to volunteer to help or if you just want, some services and things of that nature. But then we also have a telephone number that anybody can call. It's, if you need it, you can call us, and that's 501-301-4295. Now, I will mind everybody that it's not a 100% ran number. So if you're in an active, crisis, like I need assistance right now, the best bet's always going to be 911 or your local, place of help. So, we usually it comes to me 90% of the time anyway. So I do my best to answer every call that comes in. If not, we'll get back with you in a very short period of time. But, active threats that, when you deal with active and non-active, that's what you really got to be cautious of. If you're under an active crisis, call 911, get them out there, then get up to a hospital, get stabilized. And then we can jump in and say, hey, what can we do to keep you from getting to that point again?
I love that.
So the biggest thing is early intervention. We talk about early intervention with everything. Hey, you need to make sure you eat enough fatty acids to make your heart better. And then, you need all these different things that we do, but we don't talk about early intervention with mental health. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't understand why, because I'm like, we could get rid of suicide like as a whole if we just realized that when we had that problem all this time ago, how to stop it then. Yeah. So that very small thing that we were dealing with doesn't turn into a large thing.
That's right.
And that's kind of where we're at when we get out to these conferences and talking to Pope and even doing this podcast, is like, what can we do to calm those things down? And that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And I love that. And it's a conversation that needs to be had and needs to be started. And like we talked about earlier, a lot of servicemen, you come home and you kind of push it down. You don't want to talk about it. A lot of times you feel like you're the only one struggling. So important to have these conversations. I love what you were doing. Thank you so much for that. Let me ask you a more personal question, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. how have you found, you talked about how you had your areas of struggle when you came home and going through all of these things. How have you found, or what have you found to be the best way to deal with your tough days? Like what's something you do?
Well, first and foremost, medication. Okay.
Sure.
So,
I love the honesty.
and so here's the deal. And I'm not the guy that I don't like going to the doctor. I don't spend a lot of time there. Every time I have a hangnail, I'm not calling somebody, I'm
Yeah.
not that guy. But the first thing that I did was, learned about medications that were good for you
Yeah.
and different and healthier choices in eating and things of that nature. And I used to call myself Fat Travis because a couple of years ago I was about 147 pounds heavier than what it was. So
Okay.
part of me was trying to go through this entire deal, because I was struggling with so much deal because I did have an injury from the military that was physical, not just a mental injury, right? And so I'm dealing with a mental injury, a physical injury, trying to deal with all this while I'm eating terribly because I'm a cop, and that's just what we do, and not exercising as much as I should. And then they're like, well, hey, you need to lose weight and that'll stop your back from hurting. But I can't work out and do stuff because my back's hurting, So I was like in this vicious cycle. And so the biggest thing was trying to get that help. So eating better, losing weight helped a lot. But to try to start the initial process was to take medication. Sometimes our bodies get out of line and they just need to be kind of realigned. And then you're like, wow, this is a whole other world now that everything's kind of on the, same thing with your engine of your car. If it's something's knocking and not doing right, you're not going to just keep driving in circles with it until it blows up, are you? No, you're going to pull over and fix it, or go get the oil change. And that's all this was. So once I started doing that, that helped. So then it was like, all right, how do we just get completely rid of that and let's do this? So I think a lot of it was starting Heroes because this is my therapy at this point.
Yeah.
Is being able to turn around and help everybody else. Because I was like, these are all the issues that I'm having. And I hear it all the time from police officers about we can't talk about it because I'm telling you right now, I'm a police officer in the state of Arkansas. I have a mental health disorder. It's called PTSD. Nobody's came and taken my guns from me. Nobody showed up and kicked my doors down saying that I can't be a police officer anymore. Okay. Yeah. It's okay to talk about your problems. The problem is when you don't talk about it and things get way out of hand, that's when they want to come in and start worrying about your job. Yeah. I'm telling you, it is okay. We have passed legislation, okay, that says it's completely okay. Heroes, along with some other organizations, passed Act 537 last year that says that all agencies must provide 12 free counseling visits to any counselor of their choosing, to any first responder for any critical incident that they're involved with. Wow. So now you have legislation backing you up saying that it's okay to have a problem. So you don't have to feel like you're stuck there anymore without getting help. Yeah. And so that's the biggest thing. And so that's what I think helped me the most was being able to go up and fight. I'll be honest with you. When I was sitting in front of the Senate committees and stuff, talking about all this stuff, I was like, you can see it in the videos. And like, I was nervous as all get out.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
Like, I mean, y'all are like senators and stuff, which they put their pants on the same way we do, one leg at a time. But it's just that was a huge body of people to sit in front of and try to fight. And we had some ups and downs with it, but we won, and that's amazing. We'll continue to fight for it.
Wow. That's amazing.
Because we believe in it. So there's legislation out there that says it's okay to not be okay. There's free help out there, whether it's us, whether it's through them, any organization. That's another thing is, we're not trying to be the one and only organization. I think there should be 1,000 of us. As long as we're trying to help people, that's what matters, So come to us, go to them, whoever it is you go to them and get the help you need. So
yeah, absolutely.
But on top of Heroes, I'm a coffee connoisseur. So that's kind of where the coffee thing comes in with dealing with our organization. But talking about the coffee, kind of a sidebar of that is where do you do your most talking at the coffee pot, right? The firehouses start a pot of coffee first thing in the morning and it goes their entire shift. And that's where every call you come off of, you go hit the coffee pot up, get something to drink, talk, right? So actually go say, hey man, we're getting some coffee together and that's why we sell it, right? Let's get a bag of coffee. Let's sit down and talk these things out because those initial peer support guys, which is just two guys talking at a coffee pot, can make a world of difference for somebody. So
I love that. I am addicted to coffee. So I love that. Cause you think about it, you want to sit down with a cup and you want to just chit chat. Love it. Yeah. As a serviceman yourself, and still being on the lines, where have you found the best support? The VA, or do you feel like meeting for coffee?
Well, so I'm a twofold guy, right? Because I'm the first responder and a VA guy, and so like the VA has its place. There's a lot of good stuff that's there. I've met a lot of good people through the VA system, but then at the same token, there's a lot of good things that I've picked up through the first responder side. I think I've taken every class that there is for through every acronym, CISM, ICISF, whoever it is, trying to learn it. And they're all pretty much the same. It seems like, you just find one that, might suit your department better. If you're out looking for like a peer support team or something like that. But man, that's a tough one. You put me on the spot with that one.
On the spot.
So yeah. It's just, it's hard to say. I mean, like I said, they both have equally good resources. I think the biggest resource I do have is my own group, my close friends and stuff that are a part of this organization, that at any time I can pick up the phone and call them, because I mean, literally, running a nonprofit is stressful in itself. There's always something happening, or some paperwork that's got to be done, or, I've got orders to ship out, because we got a big order coming in or whatever. And I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I need help. And they're like, we're on the way. Yeah. And that to me is the biggest thing in the world, is knowing that I don't even really have to ask, that they just show up and do the job. So
that is awesome. Yeah. How cool. Well, Travis, I appreciate you joining us. It has been such a pleasure and such an honor to help you share your story and your nonprofit.
Yeah. And I appreciate being on here. And, if anybody's out there that needs help, please call us. Please let us know if there's something that we can do to try to clarify things that people don't understand in this world. We may not have all the answers, but we'll get them for you. So
yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Travis, thank you so much. Okay, listeners, you know how this works. We're going to wrap up this podcast episode, but Travis and I are going to continue talking. We're going to dig deep a little bit more. We're going to learn about Travis a little bit more, and to be able to listen and to watch that, go to patreon.com/TownsendTmusic. And kind of what Travis said earlier, that is how we keep this project going, is by patrons and supporters like you guys. So hop over there. Listen to the rest of this, and if not, we'll catch you next time.
If you'd like to hear the rest of this interview, visit patreon.com/TownsendTmusic. And don't forget, you can also watch the interviews on our YouTube channel at TownsendTmusic YouTube.